My husband's family planned my replacement at Christmas dinner, but I turned the tables with one sentence. Catherine's a corporate lawyer who actually appreciates Trevor's potential, my mother-in-law Diane announced, placing her manicured hand on the young brunette's shoulder while I sat directly across the mahogany dining table, carving the honey-glazed ham I'd spent 6 hours preparing. The woman she'd introduced as my replacement wore an emerald green cocktail dress identical to one Diane had bought me 4 years ago, back when she still had hope I'd give her the grandchildren she desperately craved. Catherine smiled at my husband with practiced perfection, her teeth as white and straight as her pedigree. What Diane didn't know was that I'd been recording every conversation in this house for the past 8 months. Ever since Trevor had drunkenly confessed over leftover Chinese takeout that his mother was working on a solution to our marriage problem. "How lovely," I said, passing Catherine the sweet potato casserole I'd made from scratch, complete with the mini marshmallows Trevor loved. "Corporate law must be fascinating. Which firm are you with?" Catherine glanced nervously at Diane before answering, her voice carrying that practiced Connecticut boarding school accent. "Whitman and Associates downtown. I specialize in family law, actually." She paused, dabbing her lips with the cloth napkin. "Divorce cases, specifically." I smiled, taking a deliberate sip of the Cabernet we'd been saving for special occasions. "How convenient." Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face flushed with more than just wine. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 11, and he still couldn't meet my eyes when his mother orchestrated her elaborate manipulations. "Catherine also comes from excellent stock," Diane continued, as if she were discussing bloodlines at a horse auction. "The Ashfords of Greenwich. Her father's a federal circuit judge, very well connected." She smiled that razor-sharp smile I'd grown to despise. "And most importantly, she wants children. Lots of them." Trevor's sister Bethany leaned forward with barely concealed glee. "She told Mother she's hoping for at least 5 babies. Imagine, this house filled with little voices again." I buttered my dinner roll with deliberate calm, the same composure I'd maintained through 8 years of these torturous family gatherings. 8 years of being told my freelance graphic design career was just a hobby. That my choice to delay having children was selfish and unnatural. That my refusal to quit working and become a full-time housewife was emasculating poor Trevor. 5 children, I repeated thoughtfully, cutting another slice of ham with surgical precision. "That's quite ambitious, Catherine. I do hope your prenup accounts for all those little expenses. Diapers, daycare, college funds, it all adds up so quickly these days." The dining room went dead silent except for the soft crackling of the fireplace. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to pause its steady ticking. Diane's perfectly Botoxed forehead attempted what might have been a frown. "Prenup." Her voice carried a sharp edge of surprise. Catherine's wine glass trembled slightly in her manicured fingers. What prenup?" "Oh, did Diane not mention that little detail?" I reached for the green bean almondine, my voice sweet as the pecan pie cooling on the kitchen counter. "Trevor insisted on an ironclad prenuptial agreement when we married. Very thorough document. In case of divorce, all assets remain completely separate." The color drained from Catherine's face like water from a bathtub. I watched her mentally recalculate everything she thought she knew about the Morrison family fortune. The house, the investment portfolio, the vintage car collection in the garage. I continued conversationally, spooning cranberry sauce onto my plate. "Everything stays with whoever brought it into the marriage originally." "Well, obviously that would need to be renegotiated," Diane said quickly, her voice pitched higher than usual. "Trevor has built substantial wealth since then. Haven't you, darling?" Trevor grabbed his wine glass like a lifeline, avoiding everyone's gaze. "Mother, please." "Has he though?" I asked with genuine curiosity, tilting my head. I hadn't noticed any dramatic changes. Still working at Daddy's insurance company, right? Same position for, what is it now, Trevor? 6 years. Walter, Trevor's father, coughed into his linen napkin. He'd always been the quieter parent, content to let Diane run the family show, but I caught the flicker of discomfort in his pale blue eyes. "Trevor is being carefully groomed for executive leadership," Diane insisted, her knuckles white as she gripped her fork. "Unlike some people who waste their time playing with computers all day." "Speaking of my work," I said, turning to Catherine with a brilliant smile, "did Diane show you my home office?" "It's in the converted sunroom upstairs." Beautiful natural light for those long design sessions. Your office. Catherine looked genuinely confused now. But Diane said Trevor. Oh, the house is mine, I clarified matter-of-factly, cutting another bite of ham. Inherited it from my grandmother 3 years before Trevor and I married. That's why it wasn't included in the marital assets. The prenup was very specific about pre-existing property. I watched the information hit Catherine like a physical blow. She was sharp, I had to give her that. I could practically see her lawyer's mind recalculating the entire situation. A corporate attorney's salary was respectable, but not 6-bedroom colonial in Westchester with a 3-car garage respectable. But surely Trevor has built up some equity over the years, Diane started desperately. Oh no, I interrupted cheerfully. Trevor was very adamant about keeping our finances completely separate. He actually pays me rent. Below market rate, of course, I'm not heartless. Bethany's mouth fell open. You charge your own husband rent? His idea entirely, I said, raising my hands innocently. He said it would help him maintain his masculine pride as a provider. Very important to him. I have all the email chains where he insisted on the arrangement. Trevor's always been so wonderfully organized about documentation. Trevor reached across the table for the wine bottle, his 4th refill of the evening. His silence spoke volumes. He knew every word I was saying was absolutely true, and he knew there was so much more. I could reveal if pressed. Well, Diane rallied with forced brightness, Catherine won't be some struggling freelancer playing house. She'll be a true partner in building Trevor's future success. I pulled out my iPhone, the latest model I'd bought myself with last month's client payments. I'm hardly struggling, Diane. Did Trevor forget to mention? My design firm just landed the rebranding contract for that new luxury hotel chain downtown. 6-figure project. I scrolled to my banking app with deliberate slowness. My financial advisor is quite pleased with how the portfolio's performing. Don't be vulgar, dear, Diane snapped, though her eyes desperately tried to glimpse my phone screen. Discussing money at Christmas dinner is incredibly tacky. I set down my phone and picked up my wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid thoughtfully. You're absolutely right about inappropriate dinner conversation, Diane. Introducing my husband's replacement while I'm sitting right here, now that's what I'd call tacky. Catherine pushed her chair back slightly, finally understanding the trap she'd walked into. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Diane told me that you and Trevor were already separated. That divorce proceedings were imminent. Did she now? I leaned forward with interest. What else did dear Diane tell you, Catherine? The younger woman's face flushed crimson, matching the poinsettias on the mantelpiece. She said you couldn't have children. That you deceived Trevor about it before marriage, that you were barren. Barren. I actually laughed, a genuine delighted sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. How wonderfully medieval, Diane. Did you also tell her I was probably a witch? How dare you mock, Diane started. No, Catherine, I cut her off smoothly. I'm not barren. I'm on birth control. Very effective birth control, because I chose not to have children with a man who lets his mother audition my replacements at family dinners. That's enough. Trevor finally found his voice, though it came out slightly slurred. Mother just invited a friend for Christmas. You're being completely unreasonable. A friend who happens to be a divorce attorney specializing in custody cases, who wants 5 children, and who conveniently believes I'm already out of the picture. I stood up, my napkin falling gracefully to the floor. Tell me, Trevor, did you know about tonight's little ambush? Or are you just as spineless as always? Don't you dare speak to him that way. Diane slammed her palm on the table, making the crystal stemware jump. You've never appreciated what you have here. A good man from a respected family, a beautiful home. A man who hasn't touched me in 4 months, I said, watching Trevor go pale. A man who opened a separate checking account 12 weeks ago. A man whose browser history shows he's been researching studio apartments in Manhattan. The words hit the table like grenades. You went through my computer? Trevor struggled to his feet, swaying slightly. No, darling. You left it open on the kitchen island right next to the credit card statement showing charges at the plaza on days you claim to be visiting clients in Boston. Walter's head snapped up sharply. He might let Diane run the family dynamics, but he ran the business with an iron fist. Wednesday afternoons, usually, I supplied helpfully. Always the same suite. Always charged to the company American Express card. Those were legitimate business meetings, Trevor protested weakly. With which client? I asked. Because your assistant Jennifer, lovely woman, very chatty when she calls looking for you, mentioned you don't schedule client meetings on Wednesdays. That's your golf day at the country club. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Catherine was already reaching for her purse. I should definitely go, Catherine said quietly, standing and smoothing down her dress. This is clearly a private family matter that I have no business being part of. Oh, please don't leave on my account, I said with mock warmth. Stay for dessert. I made Diane's favorite Mississippi mud cake from scratch. After all, artists have so much free time on their hands. Stop this immediately, Diane hissed. You're making a complete fool of yourself, Evelyn. Am I? I pulled out my phone again, this time opening my voice recorder app. Should I play the recording from Thanksgiving where you told Bethany you were handling the Evelyn situation? Or perhaps the one from last week where you called that matchmaking service downtown? Diane's face went from flushed red to paper white in seconds. You recorded private conversations? In my son's home. My home, actually, I corrected. And perfectly legal in New York State. My attorney confirmed it. Single-party consent laws are wonderful things. Trevor was gripping the back of his chair, so hard his knuckles had turned white. Evelyn, let's discuss this privately. Like adults. Like you discussed Catherine privately with your mother? I gestured toward the brunette, who was now edging toward the dining room entrance. No, Trevor. I think we're way past private discussions. You want a divorce? Fine. But we're doing it on my terms and my timeline, not according to your mother's holiday schedule. You can't divorce him. Diane shot to her feet, knocking over her wine glass in the process. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. You're nothing without this family. Just some mediocre artist with delusions of success. The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Walter's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Diane. We all turned to stare. Walter Morrison hadn't used that tone of voice in the 15 years I'd known him. Walter, darling, Diane's voice wavered. Sit down. His command brooked no argument. He turned to Catherine, who was frozen halfway to the door like a deer in headlights. Miss Ashford, I sincerely apologize for this evening. My wife clearly misled you about the circumstances here. Please accept my apologies, and rest assured this incident won't affect any professional relationships between your firm and Morrison Insurance. Catherine nodded gratefully and practically sprinted for the front door. I didn't blame her one bit. Walter continued, his voice deadly calm. Now, would someone care to explain why my son has been charging hotel suites to the company credit card without authorization? Dad, I can explain, Trevor started. And why my wife has been arranging marriage candidates for a union that hasn't even ended yet. Walter's gray eyes fixed on Diane with laser precision. She trapped him. Diane burst out, pointing an accusatory finger at me. She seduced him with her bohemian lifestyle and then refused to fulfill her wifely duties. I was protecting our family legacy. Your legacy, I said quietly, is a son who can't stand up to his mother and a daughter who's currently on husband number 3. Some legacy indeed. Walter nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. How dare you? Bethany shrieked from across the table. At least I had the courage to try for happiness. Unlike you, clinging to a marriage that's been dead for years. Dead. I turned to face her, my voice dangerously quiet. You're right about that, Bethany. It died the day your mother started planning my replacement before I was even gone. Walter raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. In the business world, that gesture commanded boardrooms full of executives. Tonight, it worked just as effectively on his fractured family. Evelyn, he said, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. I owe you an apology. I've watched this family treat you poorly for years, and I did nothing to stop it. That's on me. I stared at him in surprise. In all my years as a Morrison, Walter had never acknowledged the family dynamics, never taken sides. "Dad, whose side are you on here?" Trevor demanded. "The side of basic human decency," Walter replied. "Which seems to be in remarkably short supply at this table tonight." I walked around the table, stopping beside Walter's chair. "I'm sorry it has to end this way. You've always been kind to me, Walter. That meant more than you probably realized." He nodded, his eyes sad. "You deserved better from this family, Evelyn. Much better." "Dad," Trevor protested. "What about loyalty? What about family? What about treating your wife with respect?" Walter shot back. "What about not letting your mother manipulate your marriage? What about being honest instead of sneaking around charging hotel rooms to my company?" I gathered my coat from the hall closet, listening to the argument exploding behind me. Diane shrieking about grandchildren and family reputation. Trevor whining about support and understanding. Bethany adding her own complaints to the chaos. Only Walter remained calm in the storm. As I reached the front door, Walter appeared beside me, moving with surprising quiet for such a large man. "Evelyn, wait." I paused, one arm in my winter coat. "The lake house up in the Adirondacks," he said quietly. "The one Diane always claims belongs to the family trust? It's actually titled in my name alone, inherited from my father. If you need somewhere quiet to think while you sort through all this." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt all evening. "That's incredibly kind, Walter. But I'll be fine. I've been preparing for this conversation for months." He studied my face. "The recordings weren't the only preparation, were they?" "No," I admitted. "They weren't." Walter nodded approvingly. "Good. You're stronger than any of us gave you credit for." He glanced back toward the dining room, where voices were still raised in argument. "For what it's worth, I've always admired your artwork. I bought one of your pieces last year, the Abstract Landscape series. It hangs in my downtown office." "Which one?" I was genuinely touched. "The storm painting. The one with the lighthouse cutting through the darkness." He smiled slightly. "It reminds me that even in the worst weather, there's always light somewhere if you know where to look." I squeezed Walter's hand gently. "Take care of yourself, Walter. Don't let them drain all the goodness out of you." "I won't," he said firmly. "This conversation has been a long time coming." I stepped out into the crisp December night, breathing in the cold air that felt like freedom itself. My phone immediately started buzzing with texts, Trevor, Diane, Bethany, all demanding I return, apologize, explain myself. I deleted every message without reading them and dialed my attorney's number. "Helen? Yes, I know it's Christmas night. It finally happened. Can we file the papers first thing Monday morning?" As I drove away from the house that had never truly felt like home, I thought about Catherine Ashford. Poor woman probably thought she'd stumbled into a romantic comedy and found herself in a psychological thriller instead. She'd learn eventually, if she was smart, that the Morrison family's wealth came with invisible chains attached. My phone rang. Trevor's ringtone. I sent it straight to voicemail and turned up the radio. Bing Crosby was crooning about dreaming of a white Christmas. I was dreaming of something far better, complete independence. By New Year's, the divorce papers would be filed. By spring, I'd be free to expand my design business without Trevor questioning every late night and weekend project. No more scheduling my creativity around family obligations and Diane's passive-aggressive commentary. But tonight, I'd go home to the house my grandmother had left me, the house none of them knew was worth twice what they'd estimated. I'd pour myself a glass of the good champagne I kept hidden behind the cleaning supplies, and I'd toast to the best Christmas gift I'd ever given myself, the courage to walk away. The recording device in my purse held 8 months of evidence. Conversations about replacing me, discussions of my failures as a wife, planning sessions for tonight's ambush. My lawyer would have a field day with Diane's admission to orchestrating the entire evening. Diane could keep her precious son, her family legacy, her delusions of grandeur. Catherine Ashford could have the questionable honor of becoming the next Mrs. Morrison, if she was foolish enough to accept it after tonight's performance. Me? I had my art, my house, my growing business, and most importantly, my freedom. My phone buzzed with another call. Trevor again. This time, I answered. Evelyn, thank God. Look, I know tonight was a disaster, but we can work through this. Mother was just trying to help. Help. I laughed, the sound echoing in my car. Trevor, your mother introduced my replacement at Christmas dinner. In front of your entire family. While I was carving the ham I spent all day cooking. She didn't mean. She recorded it, Trevor. She actually recorded Catherine's visit to plan the whole thing. I have her voice on tape discussing the best way to transition me out of the family. Silence. We'll talk after the holidays, I said calmly. Through our lawyers. I hung up and blocked his number. For the first time in 8 years, I was driving toward a future that belonged entirely to me. 3 months later, I stood in the sunroom of my grandmother's house, my house, watching the morning light stream through the windows as I put finishing touches on my latest painting. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago, quicker than expected thanks to that ironclad prenup Trevor had insisted on. The irony still made me smile. My phone buzzed with a text from my gallery representative. The spring exhibition had sold out on opening night. Again. Apparently, there was something liberating about creating art when you weren't constantly defending your right to create it. Helen, my attorney, had done beautiful work. The recordings of Diane's manipulations had provided excellent leverage, and Trevor's unauthorized use of company funds for his hotel visits had given Walter the ammunition he needed to make some family changes of his own. According to the latest gossip from Bethany's social media posts, Trevor was now living in a modest apartment in Queens and working for a different insurance company. Diane had been suspiciously quiet since Walter had apparently put his foot down about her meddling in their children's lives. Catherine Ashford, I'd heard through mutual legal contacts, had been promoted to senior partner at her firm. Smart woman. She dodged a bullet and landed on her feet. As for me, I was painting full-time, running my design business from the converted garage, and dating a wonderful man named Alex who thought my career was fascinating rather than threatening. He was a curator at the Metropolitan Museum, and when I told him the story of that Christmas dinner, he'd laughed until he cried. You recorded everything? He'd asked, incredulous. 8 months of conversations. My lawyer said it was like having a roadmap to victory. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wiped paint from my hands and went to answer it. Walter Morrison stood on my front porch, looking older but somehow lighter than I remembered. Walter. What a surprise. Come in, please. He stepped inside, glancing around at the artwork covering nearly every wall. Your house looks completely different. More alive. That's what happens when you're not constantly walking on eggshells, I said, leading him to the kitchen. Coffee. Please. He sat at my breakfast table, the same one where Trevor used to read his emails while ignoring my attempts at conversation. I wanted to update you on a few things. I poured 2 mugs of coffee and sat across from him. How's Trevor? Learning to stand on his own feet for the first time in his life. It's been educational. Walter smiled wryly. I made some changes at the company. He's not welcome back unless he proves he can function as an adult. And Diane? In therapy. My suggestion, not hers. She's not speaking to me at the moment, but frankly, the quiet has been refreshing. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Walter reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wrapped package. Belated Christmas present, he said. I should have given this to you 8 years ago. Inside was a beautiful antique compass, engraved with a simple message, for finding your true direction. W.M. I looked up at him, tears in my eyes. Merry Christmas, Evelyn, he said softly. Better late than never.